And a very good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101, a new week, the second week of August, the week after emancipation, and we are ready to get back in stride, having gotten that big push over the Emancipation weekend and Emancipation week. And we are back now and ready to roll with Politics 101 in a new week. Of course, tonight we're going to have our customary team that has not been on for a few weeks. I'm talking about Dr. Henry Jeffrey and Mr. GHK Lalu are going to be taking us behind the news. So please share the link, and let everyone know that Politics 101 is on tonight. Mr. GHK Lal and Henry Jeffrey, they're going to be here tonight. We're going to be talking about the recent developments in the news. We are going to, excuse me, be reviewing the events of the past 2 weeks or so and be taking you behind the news. Politics 101 is on. So please share the link. Thank you very much. Share the link. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, are you joining us from Guyana? Yes. Welcome. Welcome to Politics 101. If you're joining us from Region 4, where I am on the East Coast of Demerara, just running from another meeting, running from a meeting there here in Buxton, reviewing our 1st of August activities and beginning to plan for next year already. We've not finished yet because on Sunday we have that big symposium on the struggle for equality in Guyana, the African Guyanese perspective. We're going to have a big panel. Our own Henry Jeffrey is going to be on that panel. Amanza Walton Desir, Darren Wade is going to be on the panel. Winston Jordan is going to be on, and yours truly will be on that panel. The panel will be moderated by University of Guyana lecturer, Mr. Dwayne Benjamin. So we're going to look at the issue of equity and equality in Guyana from the African Guyanese perspective. Mr. Jordan, of course, is going to come at it from the economics, and Darren Wade will look at it from the perspective of the law. I will throw in my bit on politics. Amanza Walton is going to look at it from the perspective of women and gender, and Dr. Henry Jeffrey also would be coming at it from the socio-political perspective. So quite a broad discussion it's going to be at Tipperary Hall. We're inviting you wherever you are. Of course, it's being held in Buxton, but we urge people from the rest of the East Coast and Georgetown to come on down to Buxton on Sunday at 5 o'clock for that discussion. We are going to be streaming online for those of you who are overseas and far away, but we are urging you to come down for that discussion because it is a discussion that is timely, as everyone observed during the emancipation activities. The question of equality and equity was very much on the agenda. The Americans are talking, told the government, you have to be inclusive. You have to look at the question of equality. Lots of the columnists have been writing on it. Our own GHK Lal, Henry Jeffrey, they've been writing about this question of equality. We cannot avoid that discussion any longer. We cannot avoid the discussion of racial and ethnic equality and equity in Guyana. We cannot avoid it anymore. We cannot avoid it at the level of politics, and certainly at the level of economics. It's triggered by the oil money and the unevenness in the distribution thus far. It is more than a red flag. And so wherever you went over the emancipation activities weekend, whether you went into the villages or the big event in Georgetown and Buxton and so forth, the theme was equality. How are we going to exist in Guyana? How are the ethnic groups going to live in a state of equality and equitable distribution of the resources? Political resources, economic resources, cultural resources. We cannot avoid that. Even at the political rally last Tuesday, you know, politicians like to dance around the question of race. They don't like to talk about it. But even at that rally, almost all of the speakers dealt with the issue of the ethnic distribution of wealth and resources. So we want to continue that discussion in Buxton this weekend. And as I said, we've invited a big panel, 5 people, who are going to come at it from the different perspectives. Because as a society, if we don't solve that problem, if we don't settle the question, we're in for trouble. Everybody's telling us that. Everybody's telling us that. On this program, Politics 101, we have been relentlessly dealing with the question of the equitable distribution of political power, of economic power, and certainly what flows from that is the question of cultural power, because that is important. Cultural power is important. Whose culture is the national culture? Whose songs are played on the airwaves? Which groups have national holidays? All those things are part of what we call cultural power. So the discussion is an ongoing discussion. And so on Sunday, we're going to be talking about that, about this distribution, this equitable distribution of the resources of power in the country. All groups, especially the 2 major groups, have been following the leaders and shying away from this issue because, you know, the leaders tell them about winner take all. And then you lose the election and you realize the side that won has won and it has taken all. It has won the power to distribute economic wealth. And are you going to then say, let me wait until my party gets into power so that I can get my wealth? Or are you going to wait and say, when my party gets back in power, my party gets to stick it to the other side and deprive them? Or are we going to settle the question of the distribution of power right now? Right now. We have seen enough in 2 years from the PPP to know that we can't trust them to distribute the economic wealth. We can't trust them to manage the political power in an equitable and inclusive way. We know that. They've made it clear they're not about that. Are we saying, okay, so we trust the other side to do it? And even if the other side do it, when they lose power, what happens? We go back to the PPP again? These are hard questions that we have got to grapple with. Ultimately, the question is about power. Power! What African Guyanese are now experiencing is lack of formal power. They use their power in the parliament to suspend 6 of your parliamentarians, and what you gonna do? They had parliament yesterday, and they didn't even miss the opposition parliamentarians. They went about their business. And they're not talking about debating $44 billion of PPP money. It's $44 billion of Halloween money. But your representatives one day, they were boycotting. And they boycott, but the boycott didn't stop anything. Because the other side has the formal power. The question of power has to be settled. The question of governance has to be settled. This is not about good governance and bad governance. This is about one-party governance versus multi-party governance. So, take this conversation to the next level. We are doing it in Buxton on Sunday. On Sunday, we are looking at the question of the equitable distribution of power from the African Guyanese perspective. And I can tell you, as someone who dabbles in a little bit of political history, one of the first organizations formed by Africans at the turn of the 1960s was an organization called the African Society for Racial Equality, ASRE or ASRE, as it's called. African Society for Racial Equality. Here were black people who weren't thinking about power just to black people. They were talking about racial equality. The major leaders in that organization were Sidney King, later to be known and now known as the UC Kwayana, and H.H. Nicholson. So call him Vigilance, African-centered brother. I think he taught at Queen's College. One of the other members who were alive who was in that organization, Stan Dalgetty, he was a student of H.H. Nicholson. And they were talking about racial equality and saying that black leaders, in the early days, grappled with this question. It was out of that organization that came the proposal for joint premiership. Today we call it shared governance and power sharing. That they propose that you have a joint premiership between Dr. Jagan and Mr. Burnham. 1961, 61 years ago. They saw what we are now experiencing. They saw a day would come when black people would be left without any formal power. They say it is better to share the power than to sit down waiting for an election come to get some power. A lot has happened in those 61 years. But we have come full circle. So we have to confront the question of power. You know, sometimes when I get emotional, it's hard to be cognizant of the history and the contribution that half this population has made, that African people have made to this country, and to watch them today having to run behind a truck for hamper and running behind somebody for $20,000 of their own money. That's why I get emotional. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life, my children and grandchildren, to have to spend their life in a state of disempowerment and powerlessness. So let's begin this talk, this conversation about how we're going to share the resources, share the wealth, Nigel, you say share the corn, borrowing from Bob Marley, in my people before me, slave for this country. And I plant a corn and I build a cabin. Now you look me with my face with scorn. I want to eat out all my corn. Marley didn't, he's not living now, but he understood power and race. Who the cap fit, let them draw it, that song. There's that stanza. And I build a cabin and I plant a corn. So people share the link. We're going to begin to talk tonight to this subject. Since it was raised on emancipation, they're all across Guyana. All across Guyana, the equitable distribution of wealth. So please share the link and let's begin the discussion. Let me bring in our panel tonight, Dr. Henry Jeffrey and Mr. GHK Lal. GHK, I, of course, was involved, and so I was in the inside in terms of planning our thing there in Buxton. I managed to get out to West Bobby, spoke at Belladrum, I spoke at the rally there. So it's difficult sometimes to be in the inside and to hear what resonates outside. But like I said, my sense was that the conversation had been taken to another level. And I saw a column by you in which you said it appeared as though Black people are fed up and they're going to confront this question now. Over to you.
Good evening, everyone. And hello, everybody.
Hi.
Yes, I think that the conversation has gone not only to another level, but the intensity, the passion that I hear coming out of August 1st and on the evening of August 2nd at Burnham Court in Middle Street, not too far from me. What I heard was all the frustrations surfacing in no uncertain terms, the resentments that we have been talking about, people like Dr. Jeffrey, like myself, some others, not very many, but some others, enough that any thoughtful and caring government would sit up and pay attention to and say, we have got too many people who are on the outside of not just the patrimony, but even the appearance of consideration. The appearance of consideration, the effects, feeling the effects of inclusion, because neither is there. I heard you talk about power in your run up to the program, and I can tell you, all of the conversations that I have had prior to the rally, for months before, prior to Emancipation Day, prior to Tuesday, August 2nd, what I've heard is that people are just angry, disgusted, disappointed that they have to beg. They have to beg for a place in this country that their forefathers, that all of our forefathers have placed their blood, their sweat, their tears. It's not a cliche, it's reality. And they still now are reduced to the level of beggars. They have got to fawn to be used as a pawn. That just came to my head. And many are saying we are not going to be a part of that kind of dialogue. We are not going to be a part of that kind of surrender. And from August 1st and August 2nd, and I'm kind of fusing these together, what I gather was that people are enraged, they are outraged, and they're excited that there could be such gatherings for them to share, to express their agony. This is not emotion, their agony that they are strangers in their own land, that they have been reduced to pariahs in their own place of birth. And come to think of it, if they raise their voices, if they raise their hands, if they raise a ruckus, they are considered to be lepers. And therefore, they must keep quiet and wait to get what is coming to them. I heard Nigel Hughes, and I heard you. Democracy without equality, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, democracy without equality is no democracy. And what does democracy then mean to the people who are on the receiving side of inequality, of inequity? It's just another concept, another slogan, another nice thing to have, except the niceness has somehow not reached us, not reached the African Guyanese in this country. The few African Guyanese that are there are what I call show Africans. They've got some other disparaging names for them, but we'll leave that out. We will not, I will not go down that road. Show people. It's suffice it to say, you hold them up to the cameras and in the newspapers and in the gatherings and say, you see what we're doing? You see how inclusive we are? Well, that's not even a fraction of a drop in the bucket, right? People want to feel that they are a part of the conversation, they are part of the contribution to the national destiny. Because when the national destiny is equitable and is inclusive, then I have a place, I belong. And I think that's what I hear as the rising sentiments, the settled conclusions of Black Guyanese in this country. And I'll tell you, as an insider and an outsider, it hurts to hear that we who have so much wealth, that we are having this kind of conversation today, that we are having this kind of conversation 61 years later and 2 years later. And I think that the connections can be made why I've picked those numbers. One is what you talked about, and two, because of what we've had for governance of some kind in the last 2 years. Clearly, things are building inexorably. They are building even less slowly, more swiftly towards a breaking point. And I think that something has to give here. And it's not just some pacifying exercise. I think it's got to be something that is comprehensive, something that is significant, and something that is so material that it is felt. And it's got to be enduring. It can't be one of these pedestrian things that come. It's a kind of a hit or miss, hit and run. Here's hold on to this. It's not. We are not. People are not looking for a freck. They're not looking for a raise. They're looking for something that is of substance. And that's what I gather from the August 1st and August 2nd, Emancipation Day, and the rally at Burnham Court. And the kettle is boiling and it's bubbling, and I can see the steam. It's close to overflowing. As to when that will happen, I don't think it can be corked too long for too much longer.
Henry Jeffrey, somebody weeks ago, you made a blunt point on this program, and Gabriel had referenced it. When asked, how are we going to settle this thing? You say, well, if we don't stop it, we're looking for trouble. I think you might have used the word war, or something to that effect. But somebody stopped me in Georgetown one day and said, they've been looking for that program where Henry Jeffrey said it, and they want me to remind them which program it was. And I asked why, and they said, because it is so obvious. Yet it took one man to say it for us to really realize that it's true. We all know it. As you viewed and listened to all the speeches and and all the sentiments expressed over the Emancipation Weekend and the Emancipation Week. Do you think that what you predict is avoidable?
Well, thank you very much, David, GSK. I believe the Americans want to avoid. That is why they call a race to America. They invited them. They didn't invite them there to say, bye, you all are bad boys. They could do that with a phone call. They invited them there to say, for too long, Ghana has been told, since 1954, I think, that the system is broken for a country such as yours. And it is not you necessarily that's bad, is that you are not accountable to anyone. And no country can run if you're not accountable. You're not a democratic country if you're not accountable. And then please go back and organize a democratic system, one that is inclusive, accountable, and transparent. That is what they were told. They didn't go there to be told anything about, gas about inclusivity and whether or not there can be more inclusive in the present system, because it's since long before independence, the British Constitutional Commission of 1954 said this country can't run like a British country. And we have gone about, I have gone about, you have gone, saying that I've spent a whole lot of time doing this. And it's come to that. The people on 2020, they send you a report, they said, boss, you got to give up the winner-take-all system. The PPP behave like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But every place, every single place, and when I said war, I didn't bring that out strictly from Guyana history, because we have been there 160-something people died in the 1950s, 1960s. In this sort of ethnic thing, and people are still dying. We had that in Dartmouth, we had them on Westmore Beach, we had them at Lusik, now we had them in Boxer. People are still dying as a result of our leaders not realizing, and I'm not saying the PPP because they're going to say, hey, you had 5 years when you promised to do things and you ain't do nothing either. When our leaders fail to understand that this system will not work. Imagine that. People who are calling themselves clever, smart, have to be called, something and say, hey, this is where you gotta go. The system itself is bad. Ghana is classed as an elected, not as a liberal democracy, as an elected democracy. And it means people elect you in one way or another. Yeah, you say you win, perhaps you won. But the racial thing means the way it's operating, you're not any democracy. Democracy must have certain virtues. And if I have to call you here to tell you about those virtues, it's quite clear no one is holding you accountable in Guyana. And no one can, because of the nature of the system. Corruption. Oh, we talk about corruption, look, all this, sue and all of this. You think the people can lose any vote because of that? No. No. Minimally. Anything meaningful? No. Because we've been there before. We've been there before in the when with Jack Joe and the housing and Pradoville. No, it is not. It is not. It's people don't lose vote because you can talk of corruption, but through your ears if you want. It's not going to happen. It does not happen in the past because ethnic voting. People are fearful of the other side, and so the Americans have to call you and say, hey, all of us are almost the same people. If I was in your position, perhaps I'll do the same thing. If I was totally unaccountable, I mean, if I had the same kind of political systems, but if I did what I think you have done, because, you know, we have heard and we have done our own investigation. I would get be in serious trouble. You are in no trouble. You can go walk around, call election tomorrow, win, and you can say, people can say you steal the whole country and it don't matter. So you're not a democracy. Please go back and for the final time, devise a system, sit down with everybody, devise a system that is close as you can possibly get to a liberal democratic regime. We, as I tell you, we are classified now as elected democracy, varying on an autocratic regime democracy, like Russia. Putin is a Democrat, according. He won elections too. You know what I mean? So these things about winning elections don't mean nothing in real terms. It's the virtues that are important. Transparency, accountability is the most important one. Transparency, less so, but accountability. These governments are not accountable in any sensible way. Their constituents would vote for them regardless. Remember, Trump said it. It's happening in America. You notice? Trump said, if I am at Times Square and I shoot somebody, I'll get away with it. See what he's getting away with? Because this is not about, I see somebody, Deep or somebody write their letter, bring the proof. Well, go and tell them millions that vote for Trump, bring the proof. It is not a question about proof. It's a question about the belief in the leaders you have. As you started, David, by saying, the people can say what they like, nobody ain't going to be there. Half the country ain't believe them. And the PNC can say what they like, half the country ain't believe them. The question then, the only way you can have a working system is if you sit down and do it. I've been saying it for a couple of years where you got to sit down and do it. There's no other way. Other than that, you end up like all other countries, Northern Ireland, Sri Lanka, although Sri Lanka is a little different, Fiji, all the countries like us, war. Army take over, as in Fiji. Army. What's really? So that is what you end up. So when I said that, when I made a statement, it's not a frivolous kind of a prediction. It doesn't come only from our situation. It comes from almost every sort of bicommunal, multi-ethnic bicommunal country that has failed to put in place, remove the winner-take-all system. And don't tell me Canada, it's happening in Switzerland, they fancy. Belgium don't have a national political party. It's the parties, the Walloons and the Francophones and whatsoever, and then they come and they go and have election in their own region and they come together and make a government. It's Belgian government. And don't tell me about how long it takes to do. It took, I think they got a record. I heard they don't have the record, but it took 2 years for them to form a government after election, much less. 2 years. You got 5 months and you're throwing up here long. 2 years to form a government. And they're considered, well, now they are considered, they are developed society, one of the best to live in and all this kind of a thing. So we have got to get away from the British system that is meant for a homogeneous kind of society where everybody's nearly of the same race. It isn't happening. Once you got 40% of the people start making trouble, you got trouble. And you have to put systems in place to deal with that. No rigging election, either side can get you out of this here. You can rig, they can rig and get a 1 seat or 2 seats. You can't stop. You can't run this country to 40%. You can hardly run a country if 10% of the people really against you. Particularly this kind of technological country of today. You can't even run it. Imagine 40% of the people out there. And they are vexed. They are vexed.
They're vexed.
Yes, because the people they have faith in has no saying anything. They don't have no faith in the PPP. They can have a few people there. I was there, but I can do a amelioration and say in the days of Cherry Dragon, when they come and quarrel, Cherry Dragon says, open the books. But you see, I'm going to tell you something. In history, you learn as you go on. You got to learn. It's not something that's come upon you overnight. You know everything one time. But if you're in a system and you see how it's working, you got to learn. People, therefore, we see what's going on. And you must learn. Leaders must learn. They can't set up no Israeli system here where you beat down the Palestinians and set up what is more or less some sort of Jewish democracy. It's not going to happen here. They might try, but it's not going to happen. You're going to end up in all sorts of war. And therefore, the answer was right. They call you, they say, hey, boss, go back home and sit down and talk. I am not, you're knocking the PVP for this, but I'm not certain even the PNC understand it, to be truthful. Because I am not seeing that they are coming up and making any clear directions about where this must go. No, they are still talking about winning the same kind of election, running the same sort of thing, and hoping they're going to do better. Burnham, after in 1964, after he won, if you hear him and you know he's good at hell, his Archie. Oh, I will, God, every guy needs are equal, and we will do this and we will do that, and there will be no thing. The PVP will be history. Well, look where we are, 70 years.
Let me pick up in you there, GHK, and then I'll come back to you, Henry.
Yeah, no
The
problem.
leader of the opposition and some of the speakers on the platform, if not all of the speakers, said they're not going to another election without a clean voters list.
That goes without saying.
GHK, and then I'll come back to Henry. Is that shifting the demands to another level?
Well, I think the history of our elections, we've always had claims about fraud, about the wrong people voting. And the last one, I thought it was a mistake to cease the house-to-house registration that had started. And I said from there on, we are going to end up in trouble. And we did. And we had all kinds of delays and disputes. Now, if we are going to get an election on which so much hinges, then we've got to do it right. I don't think it's shifting the goalpost, it's getting it right. I don't think it's shifting the goalpost in the middle of, it's starting out fresh with a clean slate, a clean list, and everybody agreeing with, look, I mean, as much as you're going to wrangle over it in the run-up, everybody's going to say, well, this is where we are and this is workable. So I think that a clean list is not a nice thing to have. It's mandatory. We've got to have that. If we're going to make a start, to say that our elections are credible. I heard Dr. Jeffrey said, well, the whole system is flawed, and I don't have any disagreement with that. And so there's a whole machinery that needs to come into gear here to bring us to a pathway. Okay, so we have a clean list. Gentlemen, we have a clean list. Where does it lead to us in the end? We are going to have, at the end of that, we have a process that everybody signs off on. And whether it's 2 years from now, and I don't think it's going to be 3 years from now, whether it's whatever time from now, you have that fateful election. Some, with our current practice, what we have in place, we are going to end up in the same place where 35 to 40% of the electorate, at a minimum, is going to feel cheated, is going to feel like a loser or like the losing segment. And we are living right now with the plights of what losing means, legitimately or illegitimately. So, is a clean list really the fullest answer? Is it the solution? I think solution is a better choice of word. Is it the solution? It's a start, but there's so much more that has to go into this here. What do we do after that clean list? Do we say, okay, I've lost post election, I've lost, I've conceded graciously, then what? I am at the whims and fancies of the winners? I'll tell you, from appearance and, and any assessment, I'm certainly not African Guyanese. But the fact of the matter, I am Guyanese through and through, and I can tell you what it is to be on the outside, what it is to be discerned as a naysayer and as a critic and as someone who is hated because you have betrayed your race. This is what our politics have come down to in this country. This is the reality, the raw reality, the rancid reality of what our politics has come down to in this country. You speak the truth, you shed some light, and this is so. If this could be happening to somebody like me or people like me, then what is happening to those who, from the time you look at them, from the time where you look at where they live, you look at where they work, and you say, he or she, them gaffer be from the other side people because they ain't been there with me. So what happens to them post election with the clean list? Clean lists or not, I think we've got a lot of structural work to put in place, and we've got a lot of soul searching to do. Soul searching doesn't maybe have relevance or resonance in the political sphere, but it is something that we have to get. That's sitting at the table. That's sitting at the table and say, what we have here is not working. It's not working. I go back to the question, clean list. What does clean list solve? What does it prove? Where do we end up? And then after we end up where we end up, whether the PNC wins or not, the opposition wins, however it wins, then what happens for those people who are on the other side? Where the shoes on the other side of the foot? Will they be having the kind of heated conversations, high temperature conversations as we are having now? What happens if the status quo remains, clean lists again, duly considered, and then we say, well, what? Where do we go from there? Where do we go from there? Is a clean list the answer? It's a component. It's a component of the search, but it's not the final. It's not the termination. It's a part of the thing. We've got to have the kind of conversation that brings us to this place and say, we've got to have a different approach, a different methodology, a different mindset on how we're going to govern this country. Before the oil, we've had our differences and they were distinct and they were dangerous and they were divisive. Now we've got the oil, and the first curse is that it has brought us where we are. Who getting and who in getting? Who's left out and who's on the inside? And right now, it's African Guyanese, it's the opposition supporters, by the masses, by the masses. Why do you think? Why do you think, listeners, that without any mass mobilization for the post-emancipation day rally at Burnham Court, 2,500 people approximately came out. Some flyers, some word of mouth, perhaps some announcements here and there, but no grassroots, comprehensive, on the ground mobilization. And you can bring out 2,000 plus people on after a 3-day holiday weekend where people were celebrating on their feet all day, and on a work day, the first work day, and they come out and spend, and they're listening. They are interested, they are involved, they are engaged, because that tells you something is stirring deep inside, and it is what worries and it is what alarms about where they are. And they're like saying, hey, listen, we've got to have change. We hear about cleanliness, we need that, but we're going to need more to give us some sort of assurance, not necessarily a guarantee, some sort of assurance that we will have a seat at the table. And it's not a token seat. It's a seat that has reach, it has meaning, and it goes back to that word that you were saying in your recital. We have real power.
Real power. Henry Jeffrey, new voters lists and new clean architecture, electoral architecture,
Now,
line in the sand.
it is not particularly even new. I think to give Jackie Jacket, so to speak, when Aubrey came in, he said immediately he's going nowhere without a clean list. So that's not really new in the sense that they are continue along that trend. And no serious political party will go without a new list. And the list, the new list got a problem. Is who's going to be legitimate voter? The definition of a legitimate voter. Are you going to keep all those people on the list that never been together 100 years? You don't even know their life. They live abroad, who can cause all sorts of mischief. So that alone is a problem. That is why I've always said that I know that you need root and branch this changes here. You need to give up the winner take all system. That alone is a problem. How you want to configure that is itself a problem. But it must mean that after anybody say there is winner, nobody must see themselves as a total loser. That is what it must mean. But the parties and because they are the representatives of these major groups of people, must have an agreement on that process. Remember, again, as you're talking about Ghana, you got to be very tentative and very so on. At the end of the 1990s, 2001, you had agreement on constitutional change. But people did not quite grasp what it meant. They thought that they didn't understand the old question that the entire thing was changed, but it was not. It was left in the majoritarian mold. And the change put in a whole lot of commissions and this and that, and Hoyt being a lawyer too, and British trained lawyer and all of that. Yeah, everybody, and myself, I thought, well, these things might work, and let's see how it's going to run. It has not. And as you delve deeper into this issue, you realize it will never work in a place like Ghana. You need root and branch changes. Even in a more multi-ethnic society like Suriname, nobody can become president if they ain't got 2/3 of the votes. You realize that? You realize when they're saying, no president in Suriname can behave like any president here behave here. He got to get 2/3 with the vote to vote him in to be president of Suriname, not just say you got no one. And that is more multi-ethnic than we, in the sense that there are many little groups that's smaller than us. So effectively, we are essentially a bi-communal society. And look how we live. We got one person that can get one vote more. It's not even a seat. It might translate into a seat where you think. But all you got is one vote more than the 50% mark. And this person can take over the whole government. They can spend out all the oil money. They can give away. They can walk away and throw around money all over the place. But they are not doing anything illegal. So it's fundamentally wrong. So I agree that with JHK. You can't, the list is only because we are considering on the electoral track. It's something that needs to be done, because if nobody loses, nobody needs to steal election. If nobody loses, you don't have to steal elections. If you got a system that say, like Switzerland, that I have, I've been with that system, said the 4 major parties that got the highest votes in the thing, they are going to form a presidency, and they are going to rotate the presidency 1 time a year coming around. Those people are the presidency, but every one of them is still a minister. He got job to do, but his year he become the president, and there's a backup office for him. And it's those 5 ministers actually Switzerland is run by, not 13, 14 people running around all over the place. They have all sorts of staff at the lower level, but it is unnecessary for you to be believing that this is how you got to run government. And therefore, nobody needs to steal elections, especially in a country with only 3 ethnicities. You can have something like that and say we'll have the 3 largest group. And then you have the 3 largest group going to end up an African group, it's going to end up an Indian group, and it's going to end up with an Amerindian group. Let them rotate the presidency, let the Amerindian become president too now. Why not? If you rotate it around once a year, nobody is a big shot president that can walk around talking all sort of confusion all over the place. Every sort of, they rotate. You're president this year, next year you are not the president. Go back and be a minister of the thing you are, and so on. So, as I'm saying, whatsoever is agreed must be agreed by constitutional reform says that, as a matter of fact. It must be agreed by substantially all of us, no 5% over the bar thing. Substantially all of us mean that over 70% of us, nearly 80% of us must agree on constitutional reform processes. And that is a fundamental thing, must go forward. And hopefully this time the parties, because they got the people behind them, hopefully this time they will sit down and come up with a system more suitable for our situation. Since 2004, I think 2004, Hoyt decided that he was wrong in the first place and that this place needs some sort of shared governance. Corbyn later come and say, yes, it is. Aubrey always been on that track somehow or the other. But effectively, you have to share power. The winner-takes-all system ain't going to work in Guyana.
The winner-take-all system is not going to work in Guyana. Henry Jeffrey, here tonight. I hope we are doing it for you. Henry, of course, is going to be in Buxton on Sunday evening, 5 o'clock. If you are in Buxton or somewhere on the East Coast, Georgetown, come on down to Buxton at 5 p.m. on Sunday. We're going to have that annual EUC Guyana Emancipation Symposium. This year, we're going to be talking about racial equality. Racial equality from the African Guyanese perspective. Henry Jeffrey, Winston Jordan, Amanza Walton Desir, Darren Wade. I'm going to be there to offer my 2 cents. And Dwayne Benjamin, University of Guyana lecturer, is going to moderate. We are taking the discussion from the Emancipation Weekend and opening it up to talk about the question of power, the question of the political system. As you've heard from our 2 brothers here tonight, and you've been hearing from us, the winner-take-all system assumes the restraint of the winning party. It assumes that the opposition party, some or the other, would have some meaningful say in decision-making. No, we know that has never occurred in our country. And so therefore, as Henry Jeffrey said, the system has broken down. And when the political system breaks down, everything else breaks down, because we are talking about the question of power. But I would rather us be talking about so many other things. But the fact that Aubrey Norton, the opposition leader, refused to shake the hand of the president, it has become a big talking point in Guyana, for good reason. Again, go back to the question of power. Because somebody or some people got it when they say whether Aubrey wants to shake that hand or not, he knows that there are 200,000 people who are going to say to him, you dare not do that. So it is more than just decorum. To hear some of our learned people talk about decorum really offers the mind, because you're wondering, where are they living? Do they think that that was just about a handshake? Don't they know that there is more happening there than to shake or not to shake hands? But I've said enough. T.H.K. Lal, over to you.
Somebody's robbing you. Somebody's tricking you. Somebody's cheating you. Would any one of us take the politics out of it, take the racial part out of it, take Guyana out of it, reasonably, in human terms, somebody, this is not perception anymore. The reality is that someone, some neighbor, some in-law, some sibling, bring it as close as that, is trying to put a shaft into you, has succeeded in doing so, and has done so repeatedly. Which one of us, Christian or otherwise, brotherly love and fellowship, the things that I'm all for, which one of us is going to be so compassionate, so considerate as to say, yes, I will shake your hand. Not because you have changed your ways, not because you have given an indication, a concrete indication of being a different man, and you still want me to shake your hand. Personally, from the decorum side, I might have, I think I would have shaken hands. It's just it reflects in me. From a political perspective, when I'm representing 200,000 plus voters, I have to consider what their reaction is going to be. I also understand fully that I'm going to have to absorb a lot of blows from all kinds of people. Some people who are just raw partisans, some people who just see one way, they have a one-track mind. But when we take into consideration the full range of emotions, of appreciation that Aubrey Norton, as the leader of the opposition, has to contemplate, has to weigh, and it's a delicate weighing to say, to shake or not to shake. And he has to come out for what dignifies his people. What dignifies his people and their suffering. This is where this is at. This is putting it in I think pretty simple terms and very, very heartfelt terms. From his perspective as a politician, as a political leader, I think he said, I will not shake the hand of my oppressors. I think that was profound. I think that was profound, that he could have put it so eloquently, yet so piercingly. I mean, there is a place for understanding, there is a place for forgiveness, there's a place for mercy, there's a place for turning the other cheek. But there's a place also for standing up and holding your ground and saying, I've got to tell you where I stand. I've got to send you the clearest signal of what I represent. So it's beyond the cost. Okay, I go again just like the clean voters list. After I shake your hand, then what? What has changed? What has changed in how you deal with my people? What has changed with how you deal with me as an opposition? Not me as a leader, but with me as an how do you treat me in parliament? How do you treat me in terms of when us as a group, when the oil money is the central conversation in this country. So you're going to shake my hand, and so what? I must behave myself? I think some of the radicals from back in the 60s, if I seem to remember well, they say, you want to tie us up in this kind of enslavement by telling us how courteous we must be and how polite we must be. But at the same time, you are cutting the knees from under my feet. And you're telling me you're going to shake my hand. So when you wrap my hand, what are you doing with the other hand? What are you doing with the other hand? To my face and behind my back. When you're sticking it in my side. As soon as I turn my back, then what happens? So if we want to reduce this to this level of granularity in terms of the handshake, the physical handshake, and then beyond the handshake, let's go beyond the handshake. Sometimes refusing a handshake is how you shake up the world. And I think that was where Aubrey Norton was. So, okay, you want to get a real feel for how I feel and where I stand? This is it, brother. I'm not shaking your hand.
Refusing to shake a hand sometimes, refusing a handshake sometimes shake up the world. Henry Jeffrey, the handshake or the lack of the handshake?
It's trivia. It's like Guyanese. They're full of formality and nonsense. You got 200 ways. 200 ways of protest. You know, it could have been worse. They could have organized to go to the meeting, stand by the door. The minute the president come in, all of them turn their back. You know, maybe they don't even know that. You know, all you have to do is turn your back. The minute they start playing the national anthem and he's coming, you turn your back. All these are ways of protest. It's a normal thing. You can take people on the street. I said, let me go and protest, and I cannot shake a man hand to protest too. It's a protest. It's 200 ways you have to protest against governments in this world. So you got all these things, and all he did was use that one, and that's minimal in terms of what you can do, and still be within the law and everything. So when I heard that, I said, this is a mad place or what? Jeff K made it just, he says all of it, the nice bit, that essentially what? I shake your hand. If you're not killing my brother and you're starving my brother, yeah, I'll shake your hand with this one, shoot you with the other one. Because that's what's going to happen. There is no way you can be doing these things and want people to behave normally. It is not normal politics. In normal politics, people behave normally. Please understand, Ghana is not normal politics. People have to be called till to the United States to say you don't have normal politics in Guyana. Aubrey, there they go. And Aubrey Hamza didn't shake their hand because it's not normal politics and it becomes a big thing. You know, sometimes I don't believe it's money issue I should have been wasting my time talking about. It's a form of protest. I'm bringing out people from their house to say we protest and all sort of thing, and you're telling me I can't shake people hand. And that is a big thing. Oh, courtesy, and we grew up in all sorts of systems. But some of these systems gotta change. And some people have already died, or four parents grew up in all sorts of systems. They didn't even have to shake hand. They had to bow down to the master. But that don't stop them from picking up guns and go kill them when time comes. So you have to be quite clear that you don't go pressing these issues. These are non-violent ways of struggle. It's not a violent way of struggle. There are 200 non-violent ways of political struggle. As I said when I began, he could have organized all the PNC people were invited to stay by the door. The minute he comes in, I'll turn it back. But then what? It would have been worse for him. But I don't even know they know that one. But the point is, because I said, yeah, I mean, so no, it's nonsense. And it should be treated as a nonsense it is.
putting it in perspective there, GHK Lal and Henry Jeffrey taking us behind the handshake and explaining to us all that comes with those symbols in our society. Jeffrey is going to be in Boston on Sunday, part of that large panel there discussing the question of equality and equity and justice in our society, taking the conversation to another level. GHK, the president and his entourage came back from being summoned to Washington. Any sign that they have grasped the importance of that summons to Washington?
Well, the first thing they came back, both of them, both leaders, and they made it their duty to address being summoned to Washington. They didn't like the use of that verb, that they were summoned like little boys. And let's call it for what it is. Nobody knew about this trip. I asked people in the media, I went back in the media, if you are going to go to meet the United States Secretary of State, I would have thought that this government would have made a great big production out of it. You know, we are going to meet the Secretary of State, and this man is busy. He meets with world leaders. So to meet with the Secretary of State tells me that things have gone to an escalatory point that is making the Americans extremely uncomfortable. They are alarmed. And the president was at the expo at the National Stadium nightly, from what I understand. And then he disappeared. They would have made a lot of fanfare, blew a lot of trumpets, beat a lot of drums about how important Guyana is and how the partnership with the United States and the PPP government is on solid ground, and we have been invited, and we have special relationship, and all of this stuff. There was not a peep out of that. And interestingly, when they came back, among the first things they addressed, I think one part was on the East Coast, was that the president went to town on being summoned to Washington. They were summoned, and I've said that repeatedly, and I'm going to say it again here tonight, because the Americans are unhappy with where they are. You know, we've been talking about systems and the need for change. I think we need a whole change of mindset, outlook, attitude.
Yes.
We need to have a revolutionary change in that before we are going to get anywhere. So look at what? Look at the step-by-step progression of what the Americans made the centerpiece of their messages. It started with the ambassador here. We heard it from U.S. aid here. They go to Washington, D.C., and now we hear it as high up as the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. And then when I thought that we have reached the high point, or the highest official that is going to give our guys a clear message, haul them on the carpet, haul them over the coals, read them the riot act, and look, things in Guyana are not going good. We don't like what's going on here. And it doesn't stop there. They meet with the Vice President of the United States. They meet, so I'm like, wait a minute, are they going to be in the White House next to meet with the president himself? So the message is the same over and over again. Inclusive governance, transparency. So if somebody's got to tell you about transparency, it means, my brother, that you've got some situation here that is being concealed. You've got a number of situations, perhaps numerous situations, that are being concealed, which means that it's necessary to conceal them because corruption is raging. So for this to be spoken over and over again in the diplomatic sphere here, in the United States, at those rarefied levels, the Secretary of State and the Vice President says that we ain't got it here. We have neither of them here. We don't have transparency to any remarkable degree, and we don't have inclusivity. And this is what is bothering the American, because we are on an express train to disaster. People are saying, oh, you're Cassandra and all of that. Here's the bottom line. How long will this go on, what is going on? How long will it go on? It cannot go on too long when people are conscious, when people are literate, when people are aware of what is happening to others versus what is happening to them. So it's like, here, y'all fix this thing, do something. Now, I see the part about the Exim Bank, 2 billion US credit line facility, etc. You know how I read that? I read that, hey, you're borrowing all this money, borrow some from Uncle Sam. Borrow some. And by the way, we want to drive a wedge in all the borrowing you're doing with the Chinese. Good.
Yes.
So let me get down to brass tacks here. We are going to give you a credit line, whether you want it or not. Right here is $2 billion. By the way, their people have to operate under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which they got to do this. They're gonna still teeth at the side and try their underhand games, but it is not as pervasive as how the Chinese do their business. They don't know about money. Forget about the Chinese government and this nonsense about we are against anti-corrupt and all of that. Well, I mean, that's a joke by itself. So the Yankees said, hey, listen, you take some money from me. We can do this. The part about and I'm going to range far here. The part about Sheila Jackson Lee meeting with or part of the Congressional Black Caucus, I found that to be interesting, where the newspapers made a big to-do about it here. It was 4 of them. It was 4 members of the Congressional Black Caucus out of 58, I think. I think the number is 58 now. Interestingly, and I made this point in writing, of the 4 Congress people, 2 are from Texas. And what do we have in Texas? Oil. And Sheila Jackson Lee has been a known, outspoken advocate for oil industry interests in her state. So it would be nice if you all talk to these 2 guys and their entourage and take a photo up with them, and it will come off a good look. They're doing great things in Guyana. We've heard that and this. So look, I mean, the thing had deteriorated into a dog and pony show, by a Westminster dog show by then, right? So, I mean, it was all frills and ribbons and fancy talk, and everybody's happy with themselves. But the guys come back here, and they, look, you're going to come out from those kinds of things. It's diplomatic language, diplomatic conduct, etiquette, that you come out and, well, the relationship is on a firm footing and it's warm and we are looking to build on that. And we have put together some things, and there's a basket of goodies. Like you go to some old uncle somewhere who is loaded, and you walk away with a little mukru basket, and you got a couple of cucumbers and maybe a duck inside or whatever, a fowl. And this is what happened there. And I think, look, we are borrowing more money. We are trying to stay in the good graces of the United States. And I think their patience, the people in government, their patience is running out with how things are in Guyana. And that's what my grasp is from the trip to the United States. It is interesting, going in another direction, how people here were tickled. That's a mild word. How they were troubled by the use of the word summon. And, these things have protocols and they have arrangements. Well, why was there no public announcement? I understand that. But for this to come up overnight, and for the president and the vice president to leave here almost like the biblical thief in the night, under the cover of dark. What does this say about this trip? They have not gone on any foreign trip, Africa, Asia, America, Latin America before, without we being given advance notice of this thing. And suddenly it's dropped on us, and we're told, well, they're off to Washington, D.C. to meet with the, and so on and so forth. So, really, whether they were summoned or not, here's the story. They were given a dressing down that what is going down in Guyana has got to change. As to what they do
Henry
here,
Jeffrey?
we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
Henry?
did hear your question.
Well, since they've come back from the dressing down in America, have you seen any hint of that they got the message?
Well, not really. I have not seen sufficient of a hint to say there is a hint. But I'm seeing they're making thing about talking to public servants, but not really talking to them and all this sort of a thing. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to do something because I think they know what's coming now. You know, this trip thing. Remember they were making a bit song and dance of Blinken coming to Guyana to meet the president. Blinken had to put up a thing and say, I'm not coming anywhere. And a couple months after, he said, well, you come here.
You come.
What? I'm coming. You come down here. Now, it's really funny. But I mean, these are funny things when you put yourself in funny situations. You know, the whole notion of independent states and all the Westphalian Charter model is great, but you gotta understand when you're small, you're small. When you're in the backyard, you gotta understand that. Look, you know, Finland and those countries live next to Russia. They have to learn to live with Russia for decades. You got to understand that. And there's a limit to what you can do. Biden says, oh, the existential threat almost, the central issue in the world today is the struggle between autocratic regimes and democratic regimes. That is it. Democracy and autocracy. That is the central threat in the world today. You can't have autocracy at this in his region. And Guyana, and oh, by the way, Biden was central in bringing together the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland. You remember, he was central to it, even when Johnson and all his lot was running wrong with Brexit that can cause it. They say they warned Johnson, Pelosi warned Johnson. She said, she go there, she lectured the UWI. She said, you listen to this. You are not going to do that. The American government said, if you do anything to upset the Good Friday Agreement, you are not going to get any bilateral trade agreement with the United States. So you understand, and Biden was central to that. So he understands our kind of country. That's the point I want to make. He's not coming here as 90% of us still don't understand the countries like Guyana, I believe. He knows it. He had to sit there. I think it's Baker was the man down there. No, I think so. And they had to sit together, work, and bring. Once Clinton decided that he was going to do that as an important issue, Biden was there and Biden worked it. So he knows what's going on here. There's no doubt about it. He knows about bicommunal societies. He knows how intractable. If he didn't know, the British have a long, big file on Guyana on this. They always have. We have a problematic country in terms of relation. They always have to have a point man on Guyana somewhere or the other to come and talk to you. If not Amos, it's somebody else, because you are always going to be a troublesome country because of the nature of your society, and you don't want to change it. You always, when the PPP had the opportunity during the discourse, after I told you the commission of inquiry that came in 1954 says, I passed these, they effectively that this country can't run as a country with these two ethnic groups under our kind of system. The British said, and I think Guyana points that out clearly at that point, hey, listen, why don't you have shared governance? But Bonham said, fine, Jaga said no, because he thought he had the majority. Of course, he came later on when he was in opposition to say,
Yes, sir. Yeah.
yes and thing, and he talked. But all right, all these things. But you see, lots of times when we talk about these issues, we talk about them like if they are mechanical things, like if they are much of an alternative. But I don't believe they're an alternative. I started by telling you that once he was there, he believed he could win all the Indians over by showing he's not racist and all that. He lived to see that it happen. And we are living that today because it's a structural difficulties that cannot be gotten over by the other side being nice. It cannot. If you take half the oil resources, cut it in half in front of us and give it to the Africans today, and you are in a competitive political situation that we are, Norton can get into the road and prove to the Africans that they should get more than half. There be no longer. That is right. They belong the country. Indians own the business. I mean, all that. So the issue is not a simple question about facts. Show me the facts. It's a stupid argument that look how much facts they showed the 40% in America and still they were breaking up the Congress. If what happened in Guyana during the election had happened in America, there might be civil war. You have any election commission that says, oh, there are problems here. Call in the FBI, whosoever the police force, and said, and the police said these things have occurred. And then you later turn back and say, what? You don't have the power to cross-examine. You're not a court. You ain't got cross-examine. You have managerial, you have business organization. You make your decision. PNC win, PPP win, whosoever lose, the whole thing is a farce. And then who don't like it takes you to court. You are sitting and say you are cross-examined. It's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. And therefore, as a result of that, you change your whole government. And then, after the Chief Justice comes says, you have the power to do what you want to do. Because by the Election Amendment Act, you could have done what you want to do. You want to cross-examine people for. Let that happen. Georgia and all those states, then people recount them votes 100 times, change it, all sort of thing. And yet you got that 40% of more or less what we call it, a European kind of group out there, believe Trump. And look what they did. You imagine if those people had not done all of that, change up, do everything in their power, what would happen? So effectively, I think that we are in a hard place. We're in a hard place. I'm hoping that the regime do get this. Well, they will. I think they will. But they got to come around to it gradually, or else it's going to look like they were indeed bullied for
Right, right.
So they will. But I think that they have to come around to understanding that the system got to change. It's not their behavior. If you give me a situation, any one of us, put us in it's not Barb Jagyo bad or Orphan Ali bad or anybody bad. You put me in a situation where I'm not accountable. You put me in a whole sort of lot of money and I got total control and God knows how I'll behave. It would depend strictly on my moral thing, and I'm not certain I'm such a great moral thing anyway. So, effectively, it is not these chaps, it's the context they find themselves in. A context that they have no accountability to anybody here. Our fun is president, Jagdo is president. Nobody else is president. It's that kind of situation. Yeah. And therefore, you can't run a country like that. It's not the people themselves. They find themselves in a context they can do what they like. If they go steal, yeah. But the people will still vote for them. And not only them, the other side is the same thing too. You can go there and you promise all sort of thing and people make excuse for you and the all sort of thing, you ain't do it. It's as simple as that.
Dr. Hen?
But now we hope that these people, both sides, can sit down, reconcile, and realize that change has got to come. And it's to the structure. They didn't go to America for somebody to say, you are being wicked. They went to America to be told the system is broken, fix it.
Fix it. Dr. Henry Jeffrey, GHK Lal, we have borrowed 15 minutes from Sherrod Duncan tonight. But Sherrod would understand. And the majority of you have stayed with us. I want to thank Henry and thank GHK Lal. As I said, Henry is going to be in Buxton on Sunday evening at 5 o'clock, where we'll extend this discussion. He will be part of a larger panel that includes Winston Jordan, Mansour Walton, Darren Wade, and I would be there also to add to that panel. Tomorrow night, we are going to be tackling this question. The coalition didn't do nothing for its people, and how the PPP is misusing or abusing that sentiment. Tomorrow night, we're going to be tackling that question. Good night, and thank you again for coming on. I'll see you all in 2 weeks' time. I'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Good night, everybody.
And to you, our wonderful audience, I love you, I love you, I love you. And come back tomorrow night. We're going to be handling that question. The coalition didn't do nothing for Black people. Some of us have said that. Some people in our community are expressing that. What does that mean? And why is the PPP trying to use it and abuse it? You're going to get behind that with a full all-star panel. So tomorrow night, we're going to be tackling that question. Good night, and see you all tomorrow night when we